Good morning, students.
Morning,
Morning,
sir.
sir.
Morning, sir.
So today, last class we had discussed about the pyramidal tracts, isn't it? And today we're going to discuss about the extrapyramidal tracts. You already have an idea, background. What is the difference between the pyramidal and extrapyramidal tracts? You know the origin of pyramidal is from the motor cortex itself, and the extrapyramidal tracts they take origin from the subcortical structures, the brain stem, isn't it? And then descend into the spinal cord, ending in the horn, anterior horn cells, the motor cells, interneurons, and the motor cells and the motor neurons in the anterior horn. Okay, and then synapse with the lower motor neuron. Okay, to eventually end in the effector muscle. Okay, so extrapyramidal tracts. So what are these? Includes all motor pathways, and they're not part of the pyramidal system. All right, the upper motor neuron originates in the nuclei deep in the cerebrum. All right, but not in the cerebral cortex. That is understood because you have already seen in the last class. Upper motor neuron does not pass through the pyramids. All right, so the pyramids in the medulla oblongata. All right, formed by the lateral tracts consisting of the lateral corticospinal tract and the anterior corticospinal tracts. Okay, so the low motor neuron is an anterior horn motor neuron. So it can be a motor neuron which is it may be alpha motor neuron, gamma motor neuron, or the interneuron. Okay. The system includes rubrospinal tract, vestibulospinal tract, reticulospinal tract, tectospinal tracts. Okay. And on a general, basis, these tracts they regulate axial muscles, maintaining balance and posture, eventually maintaining equilibrium. All right, and which is important during movement. All right, okay. Muscles controlling coarse movements or proximal portions of the limb. So movement of the proximal portion of the limb. Again, these are movements involving in the maintenance of posture and equilibrium. Then head, neck, and eye movement regulates all these movements of the head, neck, eye movement, the head position in space. All right, during angular motion or linear motion is controlled by these tracts, different tracts. Okay, the extrapyramidal motor tracts. So some of these tracts are receiving strong excitatory impulses coming from the motor cortex. Some of them, some of them in a major ways. But then it has been said that these impulses are coming from motor cortex even to other extrapyramidal tracts. Basically, it is the rubrospinal tract that receives a very strong excitatory impulse that is coming from the motor cortex and the cerebellum as well. Okay, but then in some of the textbook you'll find that or literature you'll find that these this type of impulse is found to be controlling even other extrapyramidal tracts as well. So that's why I'm showing this slide. Okay, so anyway, extrapyramidal tracts takes origin from the brainstem, the subcortical structure, or what we call is the cerebrum itself, the inner part of the cerebrum. Okay, and descend into the spinal cord. Some would descend on the same side, we see ipsilaterally, and some would cross. So we'll come to that and see what are the extrapyramidal tracts that crosses, and what are the extrapyramidal tracts that descend on the same side ipsilaterally. Okay, so but then you'll find that the lateral descending tracts. When I say lateral descending tracts, I am including the pyramidal as well as the extrapyramidal. Okay, because the tracts that finally descend, all right, from the motor tracts, okay, that descend into the spinal cords are actually divided into two. One is the lateral descending and two is the medial descending. The lateral descending basically consists of the corticospinal tract, and the rubrospinal tract. Okay, and rubrospinal tract is an extrapyramidal tract, whereas corticospinal tract is a pyramidal tract. So you find this, pyramidal tract with one extrapyramidal tract forms what we call as the lateral descending column. Okay, it's a kind of a, they eventually, descend into a, what we call as a bundle of funiculus that we call as the lateral funiculus. Okay, and the other tracts, all the extrapyramidal tracts, they form the medial descending tracts or the medial descending column. Okay, and you'll find that they all descend on the ventral funiculus, or what we call as the anterior funiculus. Okay, so through the anterior funiculus into the spinal cord. Okay, so this is basically what I intend to show you here. And again, I'm bringing back you to this slide which I had shown you in the last class when I was talking about pyramidal tracts and comparing pyramidal tracts and extrapyramidal tracts. And here, bringing this same picture here, I want to show you that these two tracts are basically what we call as the lateral descending tracts. Okay, the lateral descending columns. Okay, so which comprises of the corticospinal tract and the lateral corticospinal tract, sorry, and the rubrospinal tract. Okay, now we are not going to again discuss the lateral corticospinal tract or the corticospinal tract, which is basically the pyramidal tract. We're going to discuss the extrapyramidal tract, starting with the rubrospinal tract, which is a lateral descending tract. Okay, so this is what we call as the rubrospinal tract, one of the extrapyramidal tracts, and you see the site of origin is the red nucleus. From the cells that we call as the magnocellular, cells in the red nucleus. Okay, so you'll find that immediately after it take origin from the red nucleus, it crosses in the midbrain itself, crosses to the other side. Okay, and then descend as the lateral tract or in the lateral column. Okay, or what we call as the lateral funiculus, to end in the lateral group of neurons in the anterior horn cell. Lateral group of neurons, motor neurons and interneurons in the anterior horn cell here. Okay, so this is a lateral group of neurons, all right, in the anterior horn cell. This is the anterior horn, this is a posterior horn, isn't it? So this is basically the rubrospinal tract. And the rubrospinal tract is having a similar function as the corticospinal tract. Why? Because it controls the movement of distal, muscles of the distal limbs. Movements of the muscles of distal limbs. Okay, distal part of the limbs. All right, distal part of the limbs, and therefore it involves in fine skilled movement. Okay, control of fine skilled movement. So voluntary skilled movement. Okay, so that is basically the function of the rubrospinal tract. Okay, so it's going to be different from the rest of the extrapyramidal tract, because other extrapyramidal tracts are involved in the control of posture. All right, but this is involved in the control of fine skilled movement. Other tracts are involved in maintenance of posture and equilibrium. Why? Because they control the axial and the proximal muscles. The axial muscle, muscle in the trunk, abdomen, and then and the proximal muscles of the limbs. Okay. So, but rubrospinal tract controls the distal group of muscles. Okay, and the flexors, and mainly the flexors. Okay. So they're going to excite the flexors and inhibit the extensors. So anyway, other descending motor, other extrapyramidal tracts are tectospinal tract, reticulospinal tract, and vestibulospinal tract. But here I'm going to show you the two extrapyramidal tracts, that is the tectospinal tract and the reticulospinal tract. Okay. So you see that tectospinal tract is again another tract that originated from the midbrain, just like the rubrospinal tract. Rubrospinal tract, takes origin from the red nucleus, but this is going to take origin from this. A tectospinal tract is going to take origin from the superior colliculus, or sometimes called as a tectum. Okay, and you know that superior colliculus is a collection of nuclei, all right, which is in the pathway of vision. Okay, the visual pathway. That is part of the visual pathway. Okay, and so anyway, let us look at this tract first. With keeping that in mind, we will then come to the conclusion with regarding to the function of this tract. Anyway, it takes origin from the supracolliculus, descend, all right, and this is another tract that crosses at the same level, midbrain itself. It crosses to the other side. Okay, so this is the other extrapyramidal tract that crosses to the other side. Okay, so we have two extrapyramidal tracts that behave like the lateral corticospinal tract of the pyramidal types as they cross to the opposite side. All right, so they cross to the opposite side. So they control the contralateral muscles, isn't it? And so descends, but this is going to descend on the ventral column itself. Okay, unlike the rubrospinal tract, which descends in the lateral column. So this is going to be descending in the what we call as the anterior funiculus. Okay, and so this is how it ends in the medial group of motor neurons and interneurons in the anterior horn cell. Okay, unlike the rubrospinal tract, which terminates in the lateral groups of motor neurons and interneurons. So this is going to terminate in the medial group of motor neurons and interneurons in the anterior horn cell. Now, as I've said that it takes origin from the superior colliculus or tectum, so it involves with the control of eye movement during angular acceleration or linear acceleration. Okay, so movement of head in space, or because of movement of head in space or body, the eye will be accordingly be adjusted to the movement of the head in space, or so it's going to be involved in control of eye movement during angular, we say angular acceleration, and even in linear acceleration. Okay, so this is the function of basically the tectospinal tract. Now we come to the pontine, or what we call as the reticulospinal tract, and you will find that there are two tracts here. One portion of the tract, all right, takes origin from the pons, the cells that are called as reticularis pontis. Okay, so it can be pontis oralis or pontis cordalis. All right, that means again it's divided into two divisions. One that is in the upper part, one which is in the lower part. Okay, so but then both are considered to be pontine reticulospinal tract. Okay, and another one which is called as the medullary reticulospinal tract. Okay, taking origin from the reticular formation, which is present in the core of the brainstem. Okay, that means in the core of the medulla. All right, so medulla, and of course pons as well, because even pons, the reticular formation extends from the pons to the medulla. Okay, so here again you find that another portion takes origin from the medulla. Okay, then both descend, and they descend into the spinal cord along the anterior, what we call the anterior funiculus, all right, or bundle, or sometimes called the ventral funiculus. Okay, and again this tract and both the parts of the, I mean both the subtracts of the same tract, all right, ends in the medial group again of neurons, okay, motor neurons and interneurons in the anterior horn cell. Okay, so this is the pathway of the reticulospinal tract, and you just have to remember that they are the reticulospinal tract is again subdivided into two subdivisions. Okay, and of course the reticulospinal tract, as you've seen in the earlier slide, may receive impulses from the motor cortex, but then it has been shown that it receives some rather it has innervation, rather receive signal from various parts of the brain, from the motor cortex itself, from the thalamus, hypothalamus, even from the cerebellum. Okay, so all these impulses coming from these different parts of the brain, they seem to have some control over the reticular formation or reticulospinal tract. Okay, so again these are involved in the control of axial and proximal muscles, and important for the control of postures, okay, and equilibrium. Now this is the last tract, the vestibulospinal tract. Okay, it takes origin from what we call as the vestibular nuclei. Okay, there are 4 nuclei: the lateral, the medial, the superior, and the inferior nuclei. Okay, but we will see that basically these tracts, they take origin from the lateral and the medial nuclei. But one thing that needs to be mentioned is that these vestibular nuclei receives information, all right, or signal from the otolith organs in the what we call as a semicircular canal. All right, so we have these receptors that are present in these in the otolith organ and the semicircular canals. All right, and they are receptor that sends the position of the body in space and the head in space. Okay, and therefore even this the information coming from here is again important in the control of the equilibrium, body equilibrium, and posture as well, posture, and therefore equilibrium. Okay, and therefore it's important for the control of head and body. All right, and maintaining posture that can help in the execution of some kind of movement. Okay, so anyway, vestibulospinal tract is again divided into two. One is the lateral vestibulospinal tract, because it takes origin from the lateral vestibular nuclei, and the other is the medial vestibulospinal tract. As you can see here, the green one. Okay, the red one is the lateral vestibulospinal tract. The green line is the medial vestibulospinal tract. Okay, now the medial vestibulospinal tract takes origin from the medial nuclei. So you can see here, this is where the different nuclei are located. So this is the superior nuclei, the medial nuclei is here. Now the lateral and the inferior nuclei is here. So this is the inferior nuclei, this is the lateral nuclei. Okay, so you will find that the vestibulospinal tracts basically take origin from the lateral, which is this one, the red one, and medial, which is the green one. Okay, so you'll find that these tracts, they descend ipsilaterally. They don't cross like the rubro and the tectospinal tract. They don't cross, but then they descend on the same side ipsilaterally and descend along the what we call as the ventral funiculus. Okay, so forms a part of what we call as the ventral bundle of extrapyramidal fibers. Okay, so descend and then reaches the spinal cord. Again here it's on the medial group of motor neurons and interneurons in the anterior horn cell, as you can see here. Okay, all right, so you see this is the medial vestibulospinal tract descending and then terminating on the anterior horn cell and on the medial side. So the medial group of terminating on the medial group of interneurons and motor neurons. Okay, and you look at the lateral vestibular spinal tract. See, descends like this and then terminates again in the medial side, not on the lateral side, but on the medial side. So on the medial group of interneurons and motor neurons. Okay, so fibers ascend to flexor muscles and the extensor muscles from the lateral vestibular spinal tract, and these are important with the control of, control of limbs, proximal limbs, all right, and control of postures. Okay, and so this is the vestibular spinal tract, and vestibular spinal tract, as you know, as I've said earlier, is important in relation to controlling of the head movement, most importantly, all right, head movement during angular acceleration. Okay, so anyway, these are all the descending pathways. To recapitulate, they consist of the pyramidal and the extrapyramidal. And you know the pyramidal tract, which are called as the corticospinal tracts, they modulate the activity of the alpha and gamma motor neurons as directed by the motor cortex. Okay, and are important for actually both the activities. One is control of fine skilled movement, and even the uh, maintenance of posture. Okay, but then when you look at the extrapyramidal tract, you'll find that it is only the cerebrospinal tract that behaves like the lateral corticospinal tract, and it's more important in the excitation of flexor muscles. Okay, and other extrapyramidal tracts, they're all involved in the control of posture and equilibrium. Okay, so that is what is important to remember. Okay, it's not a very lengthy thing to remember about, but you only have to remember a few things. As I've said in the very beginning of the discussion about the descending pathways, and I told you that these pathways are basically involved for two essential functions. One is the control of voluntary movements, isn't it? And two is maintenance of posture and equilibrium. Okay, so same thing with extrapyramidal tract. You find that perform the same functions, but they are mostly uh, tracts that control the posture and equilibrium. That means a background important for forming a background, all right, posture, so that movements can be executed. Okay, so we can now again have a relook at this. I've already shown you in the last class when I started the discussion on pyramidal tracts, and again we can conclude with this. All right, now we know the differences between the pyramidal tracts and the extrapyramidal tracts. Pyramidal tracts, they take origin from the precentral gyrus, the motor cortex, basically. But then you find that the extrapyramidal tracts originate in brainstem nuclei or subcortical, structures. Then the pyramidal tracts are basically the lateral corticospinal tract and the anterior corticospinal tract. And of course, you also have to involve the corticobulbar, or what we call as the corticonuclear tracts. Okay. The extrapyramidal tracts consist of the rubrospinal tract, vestibular spinal tract, reticulospinal tract, tectospinal tract. Okay. Now, you must remember that the lateral corticospinal tract and the rubrospinal tract forms what we call as the lateral descending column, and the rest of the extrapyramidal forms the medial descending along with the ventral. Okay, ventral corticospinal tract. Okay. So another thing is that you'll find that the function here of the pyramidal tract is actually both. One is control of fine movements, and the other is control of posture movement. Fine movement is controlled by the lateral corticospinal tract. Postural movement is controlled by the anterior corticospinal tract or the ventral corticospinal tract. Okay. And here you'll find that cerebrospinal tract takes part in the control of fine movements as well, and uh, control of posture as well. Then the rest of the extrapyramidal tracts, they're mainly concerned with the body posture. Okay. Besides involuntary movement, that is again controlled by the extrapyramidal tracts. But mainly is the control of body posture and equilibrium. Okay. Now I'll not go into this. This will be for the next class. So I guess that will be all for today. And we have completed the discussion on the pyramidal and extrapyramidal tracts. And these are all motor tracts or descending tracts. Okay. Motor tracts are descending tracts. Okay, they descend from the motor cortex or from the brainstem structures. Okay, clear, and end in the spinal cord, and from there these tracts actually form the upper motor neuron. Okay, and terminating on the spinal cord, the synapse with the either with the interneurons or directly with the alpha motor neuron or the gamma motor neuron. Okay, these neurons originating from the spine then will control the contraction of the muscle, both extrafusal fibers and intrafusal fibers. Okay, so around 30% of the fibers originating from the spinal cord would be controlling the intrafusal fibers. Those are fibers originating from the gamma motor neurons. The rest would be fibers originating from the alpha motor neurons controlling the extrafusal fiber. But then both plays a role in the contraction of the muscle. Okay, one increases sensitivity of the muscle to contraction itself and to stretch or the tension of contraction. Okay, which is these are basically then executed by the both the for the intrafusal the gamma motor neuron, for the extrafusal will be the alpha motor neuron. Okay, so anyway, we have already discussed the muscle spindle, and I think we more or less have some idea about what happens with the lower motor neuron, excitation of the lower motor neuron. Okay, we have also discussed the different reflexes: stretch reflex, inverse stretch reflex. Okay, but again, I think I will be revisiting these reflexes when we discuss more into the motor system. Okay, yes, so I think that is the end of today's class. All right, I have completed both the pyramidal and extrapyramidal. That means I've completed the motor tracts. Understand, the descending tracts. Clear? Don't get confused. Descending are nothing but motor tracts. Ascending are nothing but sensory tracts. Okay, motor tracts consist of the upper motor neuron, which we have already discussed, pyramidal and extrapyramidal, and of course the final common pathway is the lower motor neuron. Okay, and sensory tracts, on the other hand, consists of 4 neurons: first order, second order, third order, and fourth order neuron. Okay, so these are some of the major differences. So I think I would end my class here today. Is it clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and now what will be good for you is that now I think you have some idea what is pyramidal, what is extrapyramidal, isn't it? But to reinforce, you must read. Okay, clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So
Yes, sir.
tomorrow I will probably discuss, the upper motor neuron lesion and the lower motor neuron lesions. Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Bye.